Our revenge is made possible by listeners like you. By listeners like you. Our revenge is made possible by listeners like you. By listeners like you. Our revenge is made possible by listeners like you.
Hey folks, welcome to this evening's live stream, a live podcast episode. Actually, we're changing it up a little bit, and we're going to do a kind of normal podcast episode, and then we're going to allow you guys to kind of ask questions at the end, and we'll be taking a few questions from everybody. We've got Tobias here, which is Zaradar, if you don't know that, and we're just going to be talking really about how things are going. So Tobias, how's everything at the moment? I know things have been relatively quiet-ish on the external side, and it's giving you guys more time to breathe, isn't it?
Yeah, hey, first of all, thank you for having me on the show again. I'm amazed that my 15 minutes of fame haven't, been spent long ago and people got tired of me already. So yeah, great to be here. But yes, definitely we've been having some time in Terra Rebels to do some introspection, but also, largely I've been in the process of onboarding a new job for the last almost 3 months, and that means that I've also been having to focus on that quite a lot. But overall, I think we're getting some good progress. Terra Rebels as an organization has been coalescing more over the last few weeks or months, and things have somewhat settled down around some sort of structure where we feel that people are beginning to work together more efficiently. And we have recently, thanks to the donations that we have gotten from the community, been able to set up an Office 365 workspace for all of us, so we can start having email and planning and all these things that we would need in order to be more efficient in communication. And we have also, started procuring hardware that we need, various components for our validators. I'm getting a brand new computer on Friday that is being hand built by BG in Belgium at the moment, based on a spec I got from Echelon. And then Mustafa, our security guy, is coming to Copenhagen on Friday as well. So we're going to all meet up and have some beer and have some fun also, right? Because that's also part of the journey when you're building a organization of what is close to a second family by now. So I think we're doing good. And now we're just trying to stay focused on getting the update done. And get things tested. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But right now it seems like we have, a few issues that we need to figure out. But other than that, it might be smooth sailing, depending on how we decide to proceed once we finish the layer 1 upgrade, because there's obviously a lot of work to be done on the layer 2 as well.
Just quickly before we start moving and talking about all of those things, hearing that you're getting a hand-built computer is actually heartwarming for me. For those of you that don't know, not everything's roses and daisies, and Zaradar has been working on an underpowered machine. This is going to be a game changer for you, realistically, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the short story is that I had a really kick-ass laptop, right, when I worked for my old company. And when I quit my job, because I'd been there for 3 years, obviously I had to hand that in. And then I got something akin to an i5 Intel processor toaster thing as my new computer at my new job. And I used to have a really big power PC, but I gave that to my son a year ago because he bought a new graphics card that didn't fit his, and I had this nice laptop. So for the last few months, I've been very bogged down in terms of the amount of testing I can do around code that I write. I was literally capable of running a validator on my own laptop, but I can hardly even run the tests on the one I have right now. So it's going to be a real game changer for me, from being able to get back up in my normal productivity gear, because I have lots of nice people who help me, like Radar and Ed and BG and Max and so on. But the problem is that often with that help comes a need for me to also explain certain aspects of my thinking or my doing. And when you're sort of in the middle of the nitty gritty of diving into the matrix, sometimes, you're in a certain frame of mind, and having to offload that to somebody else and get them in that same frame of mind so they can help you accomplish a task because your computer's too slow, that's like, yeah, it's not super cool. So I'm really looking forward to that. And again, this is another great, opportunity that arose, or thing that came out of the donations we got. And the reason why it actually dragged out so much is because I'm also trying to be diligent about it, right? I could go and buy a new computer in Copenhagen that was pre-built. But Copenhagen is like the 7th most expensive city on the planet. Danish people pay like 50% taxes. So yeah, buying a computer like the one I'm getting would easily have cost us twice the amount of money that it cost us if we just built it ourselves. So it's also just about being, respectful with the donation money we got, and ensure that we invest it as best as possible to maximize the value.
It's never stopped you. That's the good thing as well. Like, even though you have been in this situation where you did have a kick-ass machine and everything, but it's never stopped you. It never
No.
stops you. And there's kind of this misunderstanding and misconception on the outside. And I'll always remember you stating that you're not going anywhere. You're going to be building, and regardless of how you have to balance things out, you're still going to be here and you're not leaving. And it just seems like everybody's thinking that you guys aren't able to actually move and do things when you are. And this quietness has been so
I
good.
think the quietness is good, but it's also, some of it is only on the surface, right? We still get situations we have to deal with. I think in general, there's been too much faction infighting going on the last couple of months, which has really pressured a lot of the core devs to the point where we've had some serious discussions about whether or not this insanity could keep on going if the outcome was just having to defend ourselves at every turn, regardless of what we say or do. Because at the end of the day, it's not really fun doing something to help people, and then somebody sits around and say, you're just an asshole, or you're trying to steal stuff, we could have stolen so much stuff by now if we wanted to. So I think we sort of earned the marriage badge of saying, okay, maybe you can trust these terror rebel guys because they've been, they keep putting up whatever work they can do based on the time they have at their disposal, regardless of what gets thrown at them. And that, I think, is at the end of the day a sign of a strong organization. We were very rife with infighting in the early stages, but like I said, now we sort of consolidated. We've mended our differences and sort of gotten more into tune. And I suspect maybe this is just a normal transition when you bring a group of total strangers together and try to impose some sort of shared directive on them, right? Because inherently, as individuals, we're all keen on protecting, ourselves and the way that we view the world. So compromising and aligning with others is hard by nature, because it means you have to give up something. But I think that's something that we have learned now internally in Terra Rebels, and I'm hoping it's something that the community can also learn, because we get nothing from fighting each other, and we get everything from working together.
Yeah, the infighting was always going to be kind of a thing, like you're saying. It takes time for people to figure themselves out, the friction to kind of relax a little bit, and the rubbing of shoulder to shoulder. And we've gone through that here at the HCC factory ourselves, and we're now down to this core team of everybody that's kind of fighting towards the same thing. And you're never gonna please everyone, right?
No, right. And how is it the saying go? You can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs, right? So at
Exactly.
the end of the day, I have never in my life been in any company that started out with a group of people and ended with the same group of people. People will come and go based on their own desires and goals in life. That's just part of nature. And this is why the best you can do is just try to be flexible around it and practice agility in what you do, so you don't really ever, we've talked about this before, but you don't get knocked out of course, right? Your plan is flexible, it's not set in stone. It's like, okay, we're going in that direction, but if this happens, then we're going to shift and go in this direction instead, right?
Yeah, totally agreed. It was always going to be this way, and we're all here now, and we're still pushing towards this roadmap that you guys have laid out, and you've got your validators all up and running and stuff, and that's going really well for you guys. So now you're in a position where you can really start utilizing the technology that is actually in hand to benefit, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think that the purpose for the validator and in general getting validators up and running that we have access to was always to try to create a backbone. You can see that within the validator set, we have some validators who are very active and very concerned about the well-being of the blockchain. Guys like PFC, All Nodes, and all the other cool guys running the validators. I'm sorry, I'm definitely going to leave some out because I don't spend too much time with them. But overall, we have a core group of validators that we can now consider the backbone of our network. And now the job is to try building up more stable validator nodes that can keep running to make the network bigger and more accessible and more performant and more secure and all these other nice things that comes along with having more servers run the network.
This is what I've been saying to people recently, is that being a validator is more than just creating a validator, getting vote power, and then kind of just getting rewards out of the system. It's like Thor Maximalist, they built a system which I think quite a lot of people use for sending transactions in a certain way. So everybody contributes to stuff. I mean, PFC nodes do a lot in the environment, as does Jagmot of all nodes, doing much.
They do a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot more than they have to. I mean, just recently, the other day, I found out that all nodes had set up a hotline to help people who got attacked by, got their mnemonic stolen from phishing attacks. Not that, I mean, there's only some things you can do, but at least they're stepping up to provide guidance to the community to also help offload us, because I think within the last 4 weeks alone, I've had 3 direct people reach out to me to ask me if there was some way that I could help them out of the situation, which unfortunately there isn't really. So it's good that we have, like we spoke about in the early days, more independent DAOs maturing. And I think in many ways we can view the dedicated validators just like you would view your congressman in the House of Representatives in the US. And I think, what we need from here is just some sort of Senate layer on top of that can provide general guidance about governance, because regardless of how well-intended our governance proposals are, we also have to accept the fact that not all proposals are good long-term. Not all proposals are crafted in the right way, and sometimes you need some, represented elected people who can go out and address the community and tell them that maybe they need to augment certain things and so on, because it might not be beneficial based on what the specialists have told them. And they can then complement the validators on top of that, because the validator's role is more that of a congressman who serves their constituents, whereas the senators would be the people providing, let's call it, forward guidance on governance.
Yeah, so honestly, with the amount of new validators that I've got on board, and this is a big issue at the moment, is everybody kind of looks to Terra Rebels as if to say, like, poking them with a stick as if to say, build projects, make the coin pump and do all of this and work with these people. You're really just here.
Repeg to $1. Yeah. But it's even more than that. I get people who approach me and I respect them for trying, but they're like, hey, can you please tell the validators this is a good idea, because otherwise they won't do it. I'm like, if you need to use me as a sledgehammer to get that done, then maybe the real solution to this is practicing politics and becoming better at, convincing people and building compromises. Because as we've also talked about before, we need to maintain the holy sort of trinity between the community and the validators and the developers. So no single party gets too much influence over the chain, because right now, Terra Rebels is quickly turning into a single point of failure from a technology perspective. And if you also turn into a single point of failure from a governance perspective, then we start becoming more centralized, not less.
Exactly. The system's built to favor the many, not the few. And like you're saying, like someone trying to use you as a sledgehammer over validators is never ever going to work anyway, because of the simple fact the system was built out to vote on consensus and the vote power spreading. And we're very fortunate that the places that the vote power is centralized, they're with the community. They understand the system, and we're lucky to still have validators still interested from the old community and still wanting to help. And the fact Jagmot did set up that helpline, it shows in itself that you need to take the reins for yourself, and you need to think to yourself, instead of going out there and wondering who is going to build something, why not build something yourself? Why not utilize the technology? And even if you've got to start small, right, Zaradar, even if you don't understand the technology, you can start with a very small project and learn from that, branch out, adapt.
Yeah, but inherently, if you look at the pro validators that we have in our setup, right? Most of those guys, they get it. They understand that being a validator is not just about running a server. It's about nurturing a business wherein servicing a community of potential customers is inherently the business, right? And that means that you have to, the more you engage in a positive way, the more sort of impact you will have, and the more positive value you will generate, right? So everybody who starts engaging with the network as if it's a business and building it towards a sustainable path, those people are the ones who will inherently bring about the repeg of USTC at some point in the future, and that will not necessarily be to $1. It will just be to whatever price the market decides is fair value for whatever 20 billion USTC floating around, right? So if there's enough value in the system, that could be more than $1. Right now, there's no value in the system, so it's less than $1.
I done some maths with a couple of people about, they were showing me how it can be repegged to a penny, but I think the bigger issue is maintaining that peg, right?
Exactly. For me, the point of, listen, I mean, just look at what this dude did with the Mango hack, right? He just went and did perpetual long times 100, and then he pushed the price up, liquidated everybody, changed governance, and made what he did legal, right? So in that sense, you can always bring the price to $1, but as I've said many times before, it's keeping it at $1 or above $1 that's the real trick. And even the supposed stable coins, which is not the stuff that I want to build, rather I want to build commodity tokens, but we can get back to that later. But the stable coins like USDC and Tether and so on, they're not always 100% stable, right? I mean, even Tether took a hit the other day when the FBX news got out. And that's simply due to the nature of eventual consistency. Because when you have a distributed system, as I've said many times before, it's impossible to maintain a static peg across the board, because then the system would not be available for business, right? So I think overall, I think with regards to all of this, these guys are definitely championing the right path, right? So they're essentially role models, but I guess Congress people should be role models, right? Just like developers should also try to be role models, and people like you should try to be role models, because then all the people who are still learning about blockchains and learning about this and coming into maybe this community for the first time, they have people they can look to and say, okay, these guys, they seem like cool dudes, and they seem to practicing a sort of, okay, we're not going to work for free because we need to eat, but we're not going to steal the cookie jar either because we want to make it a playground where everybody has fun.
I mean, you guys could have put in a community pool spend a long time ago, and you just haven't because of the sheer fact that you want to just figure out the correct way and do things, on your own terms. And you've done really well. I don't think. Well, the FTX is a pretty much prime example of how something can collapse and no one really come with the ships to save people and provide this kind of better outlook on things and say, we can help, we can try and fix things. So
I mean that's also if you remember back to the early days of this, right, when we spoke a lot about doing it differently than what we had done in the other places before, right? I really think that the FF or the SBX or whatever, Sam Bankman-Fried SBF debacle, if we can call it that, is kind of like the Batman movie Dark Knight, right? Where Harvey Dent is first the White Knight and then he gets to be Two-Face afterwards, right? And that's because a cult of personality is almost impossible for a single person to sustain. Nobody can live up to their own, reputation. It's just not possible, especially on the internet, because then you become like something sent from the stars and you're a godly divine being or whatever. So what that really means is that I think it's important that we get back to our roots of practicing transparency as much as we can, being as empathic as we can with one another, being inclusive, trying to avoid getting, too toxic with one another, to show people that the crypto can be more than just rug pull after rug pull after rug pull, because I guarantee you that if people were shitting in their pants about regulation before this thing, then they should be shitting in their pants about regulation now, because we are going to get the most heavy-handed, draconian, fucking inquisitional regulation you can think of, with the sheriff, self-appointed sheriff of everything shooting at us, because, he just wants to be the boss of securities and crypto. So people are going to be made an example of, and I think in particular, Terra will be singled out on the stablecoin aspect, and SBF will be singled out on the oversight, regulation, whatever aspect, right? And that also means that we as a community have to come to a sort of acceptance that because the world is changing around us, we need to change with it. And this is also why I think it's so important that we stop trying to build stable coins and focus on building commodity tokens that are backed by real world usage, which have low volatility because there's an actual supply demand side that is somewhat balanced out.
And this is touching on the whole kind of partition pools, these having commodity tokens for the correct things, right?
Exactly.
Do you want to just talk to people a little bit about that, Zaradar? Because this is something that is not always easy for somebody to absorb because you've put it in Medium articles before about this. And for me, it's one of the most bullish outlooks, because me and you, we've spoken before about burning on a huge scale. We've got the tax. All we need to do is create the transactions.
Yeah, and we need utility for the transactions. I'm not going to go too much into depth with it because, first of all, I did like a week media blitz on it, so I'm pretty much done talking about it. But secondly of all, also because I've been working with a dude that I brought into Terra Rebels about a month ago called Duncan. He's pretty vocal on Twitter and other spaces as well. And he's been doing a Dr. Phil sessions with me to sort of try to put this into layman's terms. So I don't really want to steal his thunder in the sense that he's actually producing a document that tries to put the whole system into the context of a financial speak, or what economic business people would want to understand, right? Where I'm more of the technology dude. I'm like, yeah, then you do like this, and because the state machine works like that and so on, this is going to work, so this can't happen, right? Because as I said before, my design is essentially mechanical, But you could say that, and I think I made this example before, but an easy way to sum it up is that commodity tokens are like on-chain capital centers. And they start at zero, and you fill them up with long, and you can trade them into USDC, and maybe in the future, when we burn enough long, you can also trade them into long again, right? And because they are capital centers that are work in a specific way, you can't take value out of them until you fill them up to a certain point. That means that if somebody makes a startup and they buy $10,000 worth of V-Bucks, just to take an analogy that people understand, and they then airdrop these $10,000 of V-Bucks in their new commodity token, then that's the supply there is. There's no more, there's no less, until somebody says, hey, this token economy around this game is super fun, but the price for tokens, if I need to buy the native currency for the game, is like $500 for a token now because nobody has issued more supply. So let me go buy a shit ton of long and then print some more of these tokens and go and sell them into that market and so on, right? And as long as the threshold is not crossed, this will work just fine like any other game economy, like World of Warcraft and so on and so forth, with the exception that we are practicing scarcity rather than just wanting to sell a new software release every 6 months. So I don't know how much you've looked into virtual game economies, but I've studied it for quite some time. And initially, the virtual game economies, they all work fine until the game supplier becomes greedy and wants to earn more money. So they start producing expansions that bring in new items that basically make the old items redundant. They, make the value of in-game currency worth less, so people will, either buy stuff for real money or whatnot. And that basically creates a hyper-deflationary economy because of their sort of rent-seeking, because obviously it's their game, they built it, they made it to make money, right? But if we can somehow base it around real money, then I think that will also change the nature of virtual game economies, because it's very easy to throw away, something that you inherently didn't pay for, with anything other than your time and playing some games and killing Onyxia a few times. But, if you're starting to throw away real money, that's a whole other deal. So I'm hoping by merging these things together, we will create much more durable virtual economies, which will become these economic engines that provides this base layer of liquidity that will always buy long or USDC at a certain point, because that translates into some sort of value in their game universe.
I love the fact that you've really, really touched on the virtual gaming side of things, because a lot of people underestimate just how big that environment is at the moment and how much bigger it can be if you just intertwine crypto gaming and Web3 all together. And Exodus are actually doing this, and I'm working with them to help, get it out there, help them elaborate, and we've managed to get LUNC as a 100% use case throughout the whole metaverse. So those pools are going to be very handy to someone like Exodus in the future. And then people like Metagloria, Lunar Burning Nights, we've got...
Yeah, no, they will be handy, but they also have an added technical benefit. The technical benefit is that they're native to the protocol. They don't have to write a smart contract to make their own token. It's basically a software as a service feature at the platform layer. And the trade-off is that they can never remove their tokens from the blockchain, right? They can make a CV20 wrapper token like a mirror asset and sell it somewhere else, but that's not our problem. The real value that these derivatives represent exists only on our chain for all perpetuity. And that means that these financial centers can't just decide to go away. They have to engage with the platform that they decided to build their business on and stay engaged. And that creates a two-way dependency that incentivizes the businesses to actually accept, incorporating burn taxes or just general taxes into their business model so that the platform layer can be sustained.
The the idea around this is 100% something that we need and I feel must have, because if you're saying it will put those coins into the system and then they won't actually be able to, in a sense, just, profit from them coins, not use them for their actual use case, right?
Yeah.
Insane. That's exactly what we need, because I think UST at the time's biggest failure was it going and branching out to all of these different exchanges, which are actually centralized and can.
It was just Ponzi schemes upon Ponzi schemes powered by Anchor.
Oh my lord. Right, so let's move on to something a little bit more current. So correct me if I'm wrong here, it's Jacob Gadikin, right, who's been working on the IBC client and getting it to where it is, right?
There's a lot of people that have been working on the osmosis side on things, but Jacob has been the lead dev, and he's been a big help for us. He's produced an upgraded client that we are currently in the process of trying to produce a genesis for. Now, taking a database created by one state machine and moving it to another state machine and have it work is not always a simple thing. So right now, as we speak, and probably for the next week or two, we are in the process of basically exporting Columbus 5 into what will eventually be known as Magellan 1, and preparing the genesis we need for the new client and testing it out and making sure that it works. And this brings me back to my earlier point of, we have a lot of work to do, especially on the layer 2 side, right? Because when we upgrade Cosmos SDK, there will be breaking changes in the GUI layer. Now, these breaking changes are mainly around certain smart contracts and so on, and they are related to parts of the swap system maybe, but in general, the GUI apps, they still work for sending assets and stuff like that. So right now we are, based on the next 2 weeks, we are considering whether or not we want to put forth a public proposal on Agora to ask the community whether or not they prefer that we stay on schedule and upgrade layer 1 or the platform itself by the end of the year, with the side effect that there will be certain breaking changes in the clients that we will not be able to fix by that time, because that's simply just too much work. Or if they want us to postpone everything, so we then do it maybe, start of Q2 or something instead, so we get another 3 months runway to prepare the clients, because the main challenge we have right now is basically taking over the mobile clients, and my current estimate on that is that we're going to need somewhere between 2 to 3 months to do that. Not because there's a lot of coding involved, but basically because there's a lot of administration around, asking for a license and uploading a new app for the first time and getting it approved and getting it to work and so on. But the benefit of doing all of that is that we will also be decoupling from TFL's upstream repositories on the client side. And this is why, I personally feel we should upgrade layer 1 regardless of the breaking stuff in the clients, because for me that's the most important thing. And then we should make like a release in Q2 that we then call 204, and then we make another one in summer that we call 205, something like that. But we will obviously come out with an update on that, probably in the form of a Medium article in a few weeks, where we will sort of give half-time feedback thing to the community and ask for their input on what they prefer, because at the end of the day, they're the investors, right? We can make a lot of decisions, but if we can't get the investors on board, then we won't get anywhere, and we shouldn't get anywhere, right? Because our job as developers is also to convince the investors to invest in things. That is what creates a beneficial business relationship between a community and a development group and a validator group, where the development group in our context doesn't really have any tokens, they don't have any money. So eventually, if we're going to keep doing this, we need to get paid, right? And this is where we then have to start working in a more professional manner, where governance asks different development teams, Terra Rebels being one of them, to provide, budget proposals for various implementation things, and then they get done. So that's really where I also just want to work us towards, because I think that will create a more mature business environment long term, where people become much more engaged with the governance and budgeting and financing and these things that are also required to build a digital nation, right? Because if you build a digital nation with no budget and no money to fund it, like fixing the potholes in the road like we spoke about last, then inherently you're no better off than Zimbabwe or countries like that, right?
Yeah, there's got to be, you've got to have this plan all the time. You've got to understand how much you're going to need, when you're going to need it, and things like that. And I think Neblio is really going to be a helping hand, aren't they? Especially on the LCDs and all of that kind of side of things, right?
Well, I mean, definitely the funding that they're providing allows us to set up more endpoints, and Echelon and B have been doing some good work on looking at the traffic numbers they got, and it seems like the cost has been highly exaggerated from what I can tell. But I mean, we'll have to see. Right now, we believe we might be able to do it with 4 or 6 nodes or something like that, and that won't even come close to $100,000 a month. So it's looking like we got some numbers going on that, and trying to figure out how that can be done. And the Neblio, Neblio is I don't know if I'm allowed to say how much they're committing, but they're committing more than $10,000 a month to LCD, right? Or something like that.
That's
But
absolutely
still,
game
if they're
changing.
paying, let's say they're paying $10,000 a month to LCD, that means that right now they're single-handedly covering approximately 10% of our LCD requirement, if the numbers that we're calculating right now in our infrastructure team is correct. And then we just need to find a few more Neblios, and then we can also decouple from TFL at the LCD layer, and then we will truly be our own sovereign blockchain.
On the kind of aspect of uncoupling, there is always this kind of move that's always been there, isn't it? Of just proper getting away from Terra Station, TFL, and the overall system itself, right? This proper going solo. And, you guys need the correct funding to do that.
There's the need and the want and all of that, but we've also been engaged with various lawyers who've been kind enough to provide us with feedback on various input on various things based on the way that they view it. And what we've been told recently is that, at least short term, the best we can do is to try to basically distance ourselves as much as possible from TFL and Do Kwon, and that's that's just what the lawyers are saying. But if we can do that and become more productive because we have less delays with upstream pull requests, then we might as well get it done.
I 100% always agreed with that, because it's always going to be a thing where we need that kind of final helping hand from them, so to speak. And
it's literally just clicking 2 buttons. That's what agreeing with. It's just because they have the keys for it, and that's fine. They earned the right to have the key to that repo. But if we are now sufficiently capable of building our own car, why should we go and ask them for the key? We might as well then just have our own key.
I think everybody mostly will be in agreement with that across the board with the community, and hopefully validators will see it with the same kind of outlook. So Ed's recently been going through his grant kind of scheme and getting that all ready, and really taking this neutral aspect with projects. Are you aware of the new kind of way he's going about things? And there's going to be this possible payout scheme for projects, developers, ambassadors, and I can't remember the last one was on the list.
Yeah, no, I haven't had time to look into that, and Ed and I are trying to walk a very fine line here, right? So basically, as you probably know, Ed has taken a leave of absence from Terra Rebels because he needs to focus on the grant thing, and he needs to be somewhat unbiased when managing that, right? And that means that I'm then staying inside Terra Rebels, so we can sort of balance everything out. And this is why I don't pay a lot of attention to what Ed's doing on the grant side, because that keeps a certain compartmentalization. Then people can't claim that I'm trying to influence the grant program to get money to, and so on. And also there's just the practical nature of then, I have to make sure that somebody also takes care of the front end team and takes care of the other developers and takes care of helping people and all of that. So that's the split we have right now, and thankfully Raider has come back to also help on that. So in many ways you could say we got the old band together, except Stevie Wonder. He just went for a journey to Bahamas Island to take care of his grants program.
I love it. But yeah, no, I think it's really good that Ed's doing this, because we do need some kind of system like that to help give projects not only this streamlined kind of feel, but also doing it on a scale where they'll get a grant, but only if they reach milestones and they've been checked and the project's really good. I think that's good, but it's not going to stop people from just putting in a community pool spend. It doesn't take the decentralized aspect away. It's just another route.
I think at the end of the day, it's not only good, it's essential. And there is no other person in this community who could do that than Ed. He's the only person who has the respect and the how can you say, ears of all the different factions in the community. He's always a very thought out mediator. It's in his nature to care about everybody's various opinions and making sure people get heard and that you get to the truth and you come up with, he's very well suited for this as well. So I think we should be thankful that he has decided to take on that challenge. And then personally, I will, do what I can to help him by, like I said, holding down the fort in Terra Rebels, while he's off doing essential work that needs to be done. And then maybe, long term, that grant program will grow into a DAO of its own. And maybe Ed one day will not feel a need to spend all his time on it because he would rather code with the geeks. And then he'll just come back, and I mean, he's still coding with the geeks, but officially he's on a leave of absence. But then he'll be able to come back and do that again, and then I might pivot out and do something else with another DAO, because just like the validators are helping build up the business, we are also in a situation where we can do that as long as we have time for it, right? And I think we have a few fairly capable technical guys like Ed and Raider and myself, who are also fairly well versed in the business side of things, right? And this is where we're just fortunate that he will do this, and then we'll see where it ends up. But I have faith in the outcome, because inherently what we need is investment. We need to start investing in our infrastructure and building out our ideas. And that means that somebody has to figure out a way to basically ensure that can happen.
Yeah, we can never end up in a position where, people are sitting there poking and saying, what are you going to build? But then, people not also think to themselves, like I've been saying, just take it into your own hands and do it yourself if you need to. It's open source, even down to the repository. I mean, that's how you guys started out, was just by doing that. But just before we move on, Zaradar, someone's made a $10 donation about 10 minutes ago, and they asked it's a pretty good question, I think. So I'm just going to ask this quickly before we move on. They're asking, should a crypto product meant for two blockchains, from a dev's perspective, be best developed on LUNC and then branch to other blockchains, or build on the Cosmos and then branch out to Luna Classic, Atom, Juno, and all of that?
That's actually a good question.
Yeah, so I thought.
I think in general, if you want crypto that can easily move between chains, you have to go for smart contract tokens, right? Because they are basically built for that. Whereas if you want something that stays on a specific network, then you want you want to go for long. Building out long to work on another chain inherently revolves around creating some sort of atomic swap system where you will typically have some sort of mirror product representing the actual product. And then the money just gets locked up in an on-chain wallet that belongs to a smart contract on another chain, basically. So they kind of work hand in hand, you could say, right? So you need both, but inherently, if you want interoperability, you need to go for the smart contract tokens.
Good answer. Better than I could have definitely given that. I always appreciate your time, Zaradar. I really do. So things with the roadmap, you saying about IBCs getting to where they are, about launching this. There's an upgrade chain to parity with Luna V2. Can we kind of talk about that a little bit and what the idea around that is? And there was, you guys don't see this, but there was a massive panic for a couple of days of people thinking that we're merging with Luna and stuff. And
I would love to do that, but that's another talk entirely. I think doing a reverse merge with Luna and bringing them back home to the fold would be the best thing that could happen for all of us, because inherently I think we are still the bigger network, but they do have significant investors and intellectual property in the V2 network. And if we could get those two things back together in a single network, that would be a game changer for everyone.
It really would, especially if we're moving towards this idea of USTC repeg or the AFT kind of token if we walk that route. So I don't know, obviously, what route you guys are going to end up walking, but whichever one it is, I have no doubt it's going to be interesting to watch that happen and unfold.
First of all, I think we're going to rebrand the AFTs to again follow the legal advice, right? So we're going to call it commodity tokens and start talking more about it like commodities than securities, right? Because that's always been the two different options you had with crypto. Like Bitcoin is a commodity in China, but it's something else somewhere else, right? And that's basically what we need to get to. But also to just answer the first part of the question with regards to the upgrading our blockchain to get to parity is probably a two-phased approach, right? So initially, we have been focusing on upgrading the core dependencies that our specific blockchain application or the layer 1 is built on top of. And those two dependencies are Cosmos and Tendermint. And Tendermint is the consensus layer. So Tendermint provides a low-level consensus and networking layer for Cosmos SDK. That means that Tendermint takes care of voting on blocks and sending stuff around across GRCP and stuff like that. And then Cosmos sits on top of that, and Cosmos is actually a pre-made blockchain application. So if you were to just implement Cosmos without anything in it, you would essentially get Luna V2, right? Or the Terra V2. And then what you do when you build on top of Cosmos is you start building modifications. And those modifications are the tricky part to get to work when you change the underlying things. And in our world, we have 5 modifications, whereof 4 of them are well known, and the last one is kind of irrelevant. But it's primarily the market and the treasury and the oracle, and that's actually those 3. Those are the most important ones. Those are the ones that make up the swap system and the price inputs and all of these different things. And when you want to upgrade this entire stack, when you change out the base layers, especially when there's breaking changes, there's going to be side effects, right? So that's what we're focusing on first. Once we've done that, we will be at parity with V2, looking at it from a Cosmos and Tendermint perspective. That means that we will be using the same underlying SDK and so on and so forth, but we will still be running an older version of a dependency called wasmd. And wasmd is basically a wrapper around the WASM engine that was built by the Bytecode Alliance, which numbers companies like Google and Microsoft and so on. But it's built with something that they call Cosmos WASM, which is just a wrapper around the WASM transpiler or whatever, which removes all the non-deterministic things. That means the things that not always equate to the same. So within software, we have certain things that are not always deterministic. One of these things are what we call floating point math, because they're based on the CPU that does the math, which means that the amount of fractions and how particular they are might not always turn out the same way. And that is anathema to a blockchain, right? When you make a replicated state machine, you always have to get the same result with the same block. It's just simple as that. So this is what Cosmos WASM does. And Cosmos WASM then enables people to write smart contracts in Rust that can then work on our blockchain and use IBC and create their own, token contracts and come up with an arbitrary number and start sending these monopoly money to other people and so on. And the WASMD upgrade is quite significant because that's what actually brings us to parity from a Cosmos WASM perspective, which is really what brings the chains together. So if Cosmos SDK and Tendermint provides the platform, then Cosmos WASM provides the interoperability between the chains. And while there's no doubt still a world where we could exchange messages with blockchains running, newer versions, there might be a reality where, let's say, WASMD 1.0 comes out, which is still a far way away because we're at 0.29 right now. But let's say that comes out in a few years and they upgrade to Cosmos WASM 2.0 and they upgrade to Protobuf 5 or 6 or whatever. And then all of a sudden the message format becomes incompatible between newer and older chains. Then communication across IBCs would start breaking down. So this is why the last piece of the upgrade puzzle is the Cosmos WASM upgrade. But just like with the GUI layer, when we upgrade that, there's going to be breaking changes, just like there were on the V2 platform when they did the upgrade. And we have strategies for managing this upgrade to help people, but we also have smart contracts that are currently just running without any owners because they probably left long ago and they're just running with whatever money they have left for gas, right?
Yeah, there's a huge issue with that.
So what we are inherently looking at is saying, as part of the upgrade, because we want Cosmos 1.0, right? For me, it's not even negotiable. We just have to do it. So as part of the upgrade, we also have to upgrade and facilitate an upgrade of the smart contracts, which is more of a support task, creating documentation that details how people should upgrade their smart contracts and so on. But it's still something that has to get done. So this is why we might opt to say, okay, we're going to go for the layer 1 update where we upgrade the platform dependencies, but we're going to leave Cosmos WASM for the Q2 release, because then we buy some more time to fix the GUIs and to prepare for, helping layer 2 DApp developer teams with migrating their things. And then we do a release in Q2 around Cosmos WASM, and then we do the partition pool release in summer, for instance, right? So that's how we're looking at it right now.
So you probably don't know this because your head's so buried in everything. Luna Classic is being labeled as the best outlooking coin for 2023, and I solely believe it's going to be one heck of a year. And like you're saying with the CosmWasm upgrades, it's a language in itself, right? That smart contracts used to speak is kind of a simple way to put it for people, right, Zaradar?
Yeah.
So when you do that upgrade, obviously, us ourselves, we use smart contracts for everything. Our new NFT projects, staking modules built around them. Link Blaze is built around them. So we'll ourselves will have to, probably chop and change a few things and rewrite a few things. But there is a huge issue with just like me and Strafe see it all the time, just like random contracts that are running. We're like, where are these even coming from?
There's another added benefit to this, right? Now, let's take a guy like Straith, who's highly intelligent. He seems to be a diligent champion of the community, stuff like that. And he's a very good layer 2 developer, right? But he might not have written a lot of Go code in his life. He might not have done a lot of these things, but he might still be able to contribute, because within the Cosmos ecosystem, there's something called Ignite CLI. And Ignite CLI is basically a scaffolding tool that allows you to scaffold a lot of layer 2 functionality. So you only have to worry about implementing the methods. And you can pretty much figure that out if you can write any programming language, because they're very much the same. But this tooling doesn't work with our version of Cosmos SDK. So whenever I personally use it for scaffolding insane ideas like my APS keeper or the custody keeper or something like that, I typically spin up a new Cosmos chain, use Ignite CLI to scaffold the code. Then I pull the code out of that, migrate it over to the old code, and change all the stuff that doesn't work into the old APIs so it starts working, right? But imagine if we could do that on the primary code base. That would really lower the bar of entry for a lot of developers to start doing pull requests for layer 2. And that means that then all of a sudden, the creativity that could come into this space would grow significantly, because you could say one of the problems that people like Ed and I have is we've been doing this for so long that we have become a bit jaded when it comes to pursuing random ideas. Right? Because we understand the world has to work in a specific way for there to be stability and maintainability and so on and so forth. And this is where a guy like Straith or Frauk or Virtual Genesis or a lot of the other devs who are not in Terra Rebels, or even guys like Zoro and other guys like that inside Terra Rebels, would all of a sudden be enabled to do a hell of a lot more without having to understand the entire complexity of everything. And that's going to allow us to produce a lot more interesting code that can produce new features for the platform that will make it even better.
Yeah, it's all about, I always like to look at things, even from the scale that I work at, and what my level of kind of what I can do is kind of looking for what are actual problems in the community and then trying to provide solutions for them. And if you can make the tools that people use to do those things easier and in a language that they understand, then you're going to attract so many more developers, so many more, because you've got, like you said, you've got quant developers, you've got layer 1, layer 2, front end, back end. Not everybody does the same thing, so it's adamant.
Yeah, no, definitely.
It is adamant we attract new developers. But what Ed's doing with this grant kind of thing at the moment, and if that ends up going through, I really believe it's gonna help a lot of people, because a lot of these kind of projects and people that are working lack funds, and we just need to I myself just want to see so many people building as much as there is going on Luna right now. Are you aware of the Alliance module that's been spoken about, Zaradar, about them making, like creating a coin or even a blockchain, like an absolute lightless thing to do, and then mixed in with the Feather protocol?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
And like I said, right now I'm just focusing on the upgrade, so I don't really focus on that much else, because I have a full-time job on the side and a son who likes to camp out at his dad's place. So yeah, I have enough to do.
No, I totally get that. So the Alliance module in itself, what I'm hoping is because the systems in themselves are open source with the parity movement, and hopefully because we'll be able to use all those other things, hopefully we'll get access to the Alliance module. A lot of people are asking Zaradar about a kind of on and off ramp for the Terra station in itself. What are the possibilities of that being possible? Because on Luna, they have not an on and off ramp, but I think it's the ability to just click and buy Luna from 3 different exchanges?
No. I understand. So we're talking about Matt's proposal, and which I also fully endorse. I think it's more a matter of finding the time for it. I have put a pretty big ask to the front-end team, which is I need them to re-implement the entire GUI layer into a composable architecture so we can decompose Terra Station and make it so that people can embed the wallet in their website or the staking thing in their website or whatever, because that will increase our network effect by an order of magnitude while also allowing reuse. So I have a kickoff meeting with them on the architecture tomorrow because I've been building these kinds of architectures for a decade now. And hopefully we'll be able to get that ball rolling, and then we will end up basically rebuilding the entire front end from the ground up.
Absolutely amazing. So I have put in the comments section, because we're about at an hour now, and you know I like to do these for around an hour. So I've asked for people to ask questions, and I'm just going to ask a few of them off the bat. And one of them are, and this is pretty irrelevant to you, I think, but kind of relevant. What are his thoughts on clickbaiters damaging the community?
I get 5 to 20 SMSs every week with phishing attacks. I get robocalled with scam things. I get phishing emails every day. When I teach security to people once in a while, I tend to tell them that in the world we live in today, we should be teaching kids in school IT security just like we're teaching them STD prevention and stuff like that. Because it's here to stay, and it's not going to be any less. And that's why it's something that people will have to get used to, and it's something that we need to help educate people around. But it's also something we can, to some degree, prevent against. If we rebuild the client layers, we can build in cross-site scripting protection. We can build in cross-site request forgery protection. We can't really protect against phishing attacks, but what we could do is we could HTML encode all the links that comes from governance proposals. So there are no links to click. You will literally have to copy it out and put it into your browser, right? And then if you did that, then maybe you did ask for it anyways, right? So those are things that we can do to help with these things. But it's just the world we live in. There's just no other way around it. That's an unfortunate situation.
Yeah, agreed. You definitely got to be wary of what you're watching, where you're getting stuff from, and what you're clicking on. So the next question is, what can we do as a community to help make things go as smoothly as possible? I'm just going to give a pre-answer to this. Give them time, give them space, and yeah. But Zaradar, go for it.
Yeah, I mean that, but I think they've actually been fairly good with that the last, few months, like we spoke about earlier, with a few exceptions that are maybe more localized to certain individuals rather than to the community at large. I think the single most important thing people can do is keep working towards bringing the community together. Break down the factions, agree that we can only progress forward as a united community. Talk about your differences, figure them out. That's how democracy works. Create compromises and stop fighting one another, because we still have 20,000 plus other blockchains that we can go and fight with instead. Yeah. So that for me is the thing that the community can do. Be patient with one another, be inquisitive, but also, don't be naive. Challenge people on their facts and have logical, reasonable discussions about things to get to the best possible outcome. But be respectful while you do it. That is how the community right now can help with things. And then just keep educating yourself, keep learning about the investment that you made. If you got into crypto the first time, from an old timer who's been around for 8 years and who's been liquidated more times than I care to admit, I would just say that it's just part of the experience. We are changing the nature of the economic reality that our world is built upon. And that's a fun, interesting, wild ride. And if you become a millionaire along the way, great for you. But that's not really what's it about. That's why I keep posting these Joker memes about it's not about the money, because it's not about the money. It's about the technology and about revolutionizing the way that finances work so we can remove the rent seeking of the middlemen and create a fair, open, transparent digital economy that is equally balanced for everybody.
100% agreed. CoinMarketCap have only just today finally upgraded to the true circulating supply, and we've been doing it at Lung Penguins from the get-go. Total middleman.
Yeah, but they have a lot of shit to keep track of. I actually have a lot of respect for the CoinMarketCap guys. I know at the surface their application seems simple, but when you have to ingest the amount of data that these guys are processing, then you have to have a finely tuned backend system that can, basically process hundreds of thousands of inputs to make sure that all the different databases are up to date and all these different things. So I think, hats off for them, and I'm grateful that they finally got around to it. I think they should have done it sooner.
Definitely.
But that's just my view as a lunatic. If I have to take on the more logical hat, I'm more like, okay, they have 19,000 plus other things they also need to update. They'll probably get around to it, and but I actually love that site. I've been using it since the crypto market cap was in $100 million range or $200 million range or something like that. And it's just been so fun watching that number grow over the years.
No, I must admit it is a good system, and I can't imagine. Well, we run Lunk Penguins. We know how hard it is, so I can imagine how hard it is, to be fair. So the next question is, can we have? I'm going to change the question a little bit because it's asking about one project specifically. But can we have TR market projects a bit more? The project he's asking is Exodus, but we've got Exodus, Burning Nights. Metagloria, Miata's launched as well, which is a launch pad. So kind of projects like that, I guess, Zaradar.
My concern with that, well, first of all, I would say my personal view is no, we shouldn't. Right? Our focus in Terra Rebel should be the layer 1 system along with the supporting client applications, because that's more than enough. My concern, if we started doing this in general, is that we would end up becoming something akin to Procter and Gamble. So we would have hundreds of DApp brands that we would inherently co-own through, equity for work or whatever. And that would just make us like a big spider at the center of the financial cobweb of everything, which would just make us, TFL and LFG combined. So I think inherently, as I've said to other people, I will happily, if I have the time and the resources for it, spend the rest of my life engaging with developers in our community to help them if they're doing work that produces actual value. And if that then empowers them to become their own small sub-DAOs and be their own layer 2 things, that just makes a much more balanced system overall. So I would say that I understand where the idea is coming from, because we get a lot of, can you repeg to $1 or can you do this or do that? But we inherently back off on a lot of it simply because it's not in anybody's interest to do it. It's really like my lazy teenager on the couch asking me to get him a bottle of water because he wants one and he's too lazy to get off his ass and do it himself. Right. And what that brings about is a situation where my son, who's obviously a child, so it shouldn't be any different, but he's very dependent on me on everything. Right. And it's actually been one of the big joys in my life the few recent years, aside from dealing with all the mess from the COVID thing with kids his age and so on. But watching him sort of grow into this maturity where he's decoupling a lot more from me. He's still not getting off the couch to get a bottle of water, but at least, he's starting to put his dirty laundry in the laundry basket, and maybe once in a while he'll actually go shopping and stuff like that. And that's progress, and that makes us as a family more decentralized, which means if something were to happen to me, then he wouldn't be all left on his own. He would still be able to fend for himself. And that's my job as a parent. And as, I guess, a guardian of this community, it's also my job to make sure that we take decisions that makes us less codependent and more interoperable.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. So, Tobias, the next one is I'm aware of this. I don't know if you are. Is Tobias aware of the holocracy proposal that's being worked on by community members? If so, does he have an opinion on it?
Yeah, I'm aware of it. I don't have an opinion on holocracy. It's like I think it came about somewhere around 2012, 2015, something like that. It's basically the idea that you can self-organize around people who get how can you say, a grant, just to put it into a context we just talked about, for maintaining certain responsibilities for the group as a whole, right? So rather than having, a lot of bosses, you get like a lot of collaborating business owners or whatever who then gets funded. The problem is that we really need the grants program and an actual budget to be able to practice holacracy, because it doesn't really work without it. Because how would you place responsibility with someone? Or let me rephrase that: how do you actually make people accountable for something? Because it's one thing for you and I to go, on a pub one evening and get shit faced and make all sorts of promises in our bromance. But then the next day, when the real world checks in, we might not be inclined to meet all of those promises. And because they were all just said in good jest while two friends were having beer, that's cool. But if all of a sudden it was a working relationship where people are accountable for their deliveries and so on, then it becomes a lot more professional and a lot more, predictable, so to speak. So I think the key challenge to something like holacracy is getting it funded.
Yeah, funding's always going to be a big issue with stuff like that. I know companies have utilized that, like Tesla, and I know a company actually came up with the concept itself, but I think there's many overruling factors with that, and funding is obviously going to be the key thing with it for sure.
I think one thing to keep in mind, right, is that our community is still poor as broke, even though our market value is $1.5 billion, right? And the reason for that is because, yes, there's definitely a lot of new investors who came in, but there's also a lot of existing investors who are still carrying big bags and who've been dollar cost averaging for a long time, right? And that means that often people talk about, yes, we can get whatever million for this and whatever million for that. But the way that I see it is that we are slowly going on a trajectory where, we're seeing positive growth if we just keep doing diligent work. But there are no $200 million for us to just carve out of the market cap to build wild stuff with. That would collapse the price.
Exactly.
Right? And people are not, inclined to donate a lot right now. Maybe they might be in the future, simply because a lot of them are still poor as broke. They're still nurturing bags, right? They're just buying up the market because they believe in what we're doing, and they want to sort of recover their losses and potentially also make, money off their investment. So I think maybe if we get to like the $10 billion market cap level, then I think we will see getting funding for grand ideas becoming a lot easier. But where we are right now, it's still, just to put it into perspective, we got like, I think, 35K worth of donations in the Open Collective. But the market cap grew by $1 billion, right? So looking at that in comparison, it's a very small amount of available investable capital. And that's why I also have this opinion that the only way for us to repeg USTC to any price point that makes sense is through, hard work. Because there are no way for us to just bring money out of the market cap right now. Sure, we can do dilution by printing more money and so on, but that's just like giving everybody a haircut and then spending that money in the hope that it will work. But there's no guarantees. You could just invest the 200 or 100 or 50 million dollars, and then it would all go to shit, because if you look at the success rate for startups, it's not very high, right? So we have to accept that anything we invest also has a certain loss related to it. And that's why I think it's more sustainable for us to have, demand-driven investment, where people who are willing to build business concepts, bring capital to get stuff done. And that's either through bringing users into their network that pays a fee for using the service, or investing in the network in one way or the other.
Yeah, and with this whole funding thing and building and you saying, people are there willing to, invest on that level of actually buying into it because of what's going on externally and internally, so to speak. But we actually need, people to be able to build things, but have the funding, and then it also create further funding for that to continue. And like us ourselves, like I was saying, right, we built Lunk Penguins, then we built the Blaze portal, and now we're doing an NFT project, which in itself is not designed to make anybody any money. It's designed to make the actual holders money. And now that we're getting somewhere, we can actually build more. We can look at these more kind of crazier ideas of how we could possibly, because something the community really wants is to burn more coins. And if we can figure out a way to get funding off of the chain, right, to then buy back and burn Luna Classic, it's better than us finding ways to get money out of our own system and burn Luna Classic. So funding and moving forward is everything for projects. 100%.
And I mean, it all happens through economic activity, either on chain because businesses are building, or off chain where people go to work and then they go home and spend part of their salary on buying, more of their investment because they believe in it. But at the end of the day, regardless of how, this comes about, it happens through people, putting in the effort and getting the work done.
Agreed. We need more people building just across the board, honestly. But there are really good people building, like Rap Luna is coming onto the chain. Zaradar, can you answer this for me? I've actually been waiting to actually ask you this. If a coin is developed, a token is developed on chain, right? So we've got all of these tokens currently outside of the stable coins. Do they pay a tax to the system?
Yes.
Good. That's what I was thinking. So like new tokens coming on the chain, utilizing our chain, so to speak, that's going to help us, right?
Yes, plus the commodity tokens would also be subject to utility tax. So there are two types of taxes right now. There's the fee for sending transactions. That's like an implicit tax, right? Because part of that fee goes into the taxes and so on. And then there's something called a token tax or a swap tax that's applied whenever you swap between Luna-based derivatives, right? So we have Terra-based derivatives. So we have the Luna pool where Lunk lives, and then we have the Terra pool where everything else lives. And then what we would do is we would say all of the commodity partitions, they would also pay a utility tax for using certain key utilities on the blockchain. Because the older generation holders like the USTC and long holders, they obviously deserve some sort of return on their investment when these new coins get to come in and set up shop in a zero volatility pond that they can control, which is fully integrated with the platform, and they can start building out their business.
Agreed. So in itself, Zaradar, there's a lot of people that are going round at the moment, and someone's just asked this: can we force all validators to put a 1.2% tax on rewards? And just before I let you elaborate on that a little bit, what people need to understand is all rewards come from the Oracle rewards pool, and those coins it's a very small amount that we actually have, and those are a reason for you to delegate your coins with validators, and a reason for validators to secure the blockchain by running a node, so to speak. And there's so many more coins externally that it's not a good idea to keep whacking taxes on our own internal system, because eventually it will run dry, right?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a bit tired, mate.
That's all right.
But definitely. I think, at the end of the day, the people who keep working, they're the ones who make it, right? The people who just keep talking, they will not amount to much in life.
Yeah, we kind of end up with angry people. So I think it's been an absolutely wicked podcast. In fact, it's an hour and 20 minutes now, dude. I know you've had a busy day. You've, been doing your own personal things. We're going to cut it there, folks. Thank you so much for showing up. Zaradar, any kind of last things you want to leave the community with just before we head off here?
No, just be kind to one another and keep, encouraging a positive mentality in the community and respectful debate around things. Democracy is again about compromise. Compromise is probably one of the hardest things in life. So I'm not asking for an easy thing, but sometimes it's worth considering that the person at the other end of the line also has a life and a reality, and maybe it's not always just your view on things that matter. Maybe the truth is somewhere between the two different views.
Wise words, brother. Wise words. Folks, thanks for showing up. Really appreciate it. And we will catch you in the next one. Stay safe. And none of this is financial advice. Beware of that scammers, doppelgangers, anybody pretending to be us. And we'll catch you in the next one.